In the middle of the Atlantic Sea, an airplane unloads several crates containing valuable merchandise. Minutes later, a group of mercenaries, led by Captain Oscar, set off in their speedboat to collect them, but they soon discover that the sea is surrounded by sharks. Even so, Oscar orders his team to prepare the weapons and get on with the job, otherwise they won't get paid. So, the group starts pulling the boxes, when suddenly, a huge great white shark appears and breaks one of them with its bite. As a result, the box bursts open and glass jars start falling into the water, with the captain ordering his team to take them back. Rex and Harper think it's best to put this dangerous job to one side, but Oscar doesn't want to leave empty-handed and quickly pulls a gun on the group. He also orders Campbell to go into the water and collect the goods, or the three of them will be eliminated right there. With no other choice, she obeys the order and manages to get the pot back, but is soon pulled to the bottom of the sea by one of the sharks. Oscar, Rex and Harper try to shoot the predators, but the sharks manage to jump onto the boat and one by one devour the whole team. 5 years before this incident, the couple Gia and Dalton are enjoying their honeymoon in a resort and are preparing to go sailing on their new boat. Before they go, Dalton tells them that he has been hired for an important job and will be away for a few days. Even though she doesn't want him to go, Gia supports her husband in his decision, but in the present day, she returns to the same resort, but this time Dalton isn't around. Shortly afterwards, Jim, a friend of the couple, tells Gia that his boat is ready for the trip out to sea. The young woman thanks him and cries as she remembers her late husband, who used to take her on these trips every year. Nearby, a tycoon known as the Reverend is watching the sea when one of his subordinates, Jareth, shows up with bad news. He tells him that the job to collect the boxes of merchandise has failed and that the team has not yet returned. Furious, the Reverend starts twisting Jareth's finger and advises him to sort it out, or he'll pay dearly for this mistake. He obeys and contacts some acquaintances to set up a new search team. Hours later, he meets up with his partners, Silas and Baden, who have hired a new sniper, known as Lee. In addition to them, Jareth reunites with Charlotte, a partner and former rival, who has just stolen the yacht and equipment of one of the resort's guests. While the group finishes their preparations, Gia sets off with her speedboat across the sea and remembers when she made the same trip with Dalton. When she arrives at her destination, the young woman dives in and begins to explore the waters, which appear to be safe and free of sharks. In the middle of her exploration, Gia comes across a glass jar stuck in the sand and takes it back for inspection. Inside the boat, she sees a sticker marked Reverend's Tea, but inside she finds the tea mixed with a packet of illegal substances. Gia quickly calls her colleague, Agent Lydia, and says she has found evidence that is connected to Dalton's case. Unbeknownst to her, the Reverend's team is about to leave the port when the last member, computer expert Teller, shows up. Finally, the group sets out to sea, and thanks to radar technology, they locate the lost merchandise. However, when they arrive at the indicated location, they find Gia's boat and Charlotte immediately tells everyone to hide their weapons. Silas then takes a look through the binoculars and sees the crew member, who appears to be a simple civilian fishing on the high seas. To avoid attracting attention, they decide to turn around and look for the merchandise and Captain Oscar's boat, but there is no sign of his vessel anywhere. Finding this very suspicious, Charlotte tries to contact the Reverend, who is inaugurating new renovations in the town. After the event, the tycoon goes to see Governor Willis, saying he's waiting for the go-ahead for his new business, a line of teas for sale. Without having any idea of the Reverend's real intentions, the governor approves the financing, as compensation for his help in the city. After the conversation, the Reverend answers a call from Charlotte, who says she has located the merchandise, but hasn't found Captain Oscar's ship. What's more, there's a civilian fishing exactly where he was, which only raises the Reverend's suspicions even more. He then orders the team to recover the valuable cargo and keep the young woman under surveillance, with authorization to use heavy weapons if necessary. Everyone agrees and finally Jareth, Charlotte and Silas prepare the diving equipment to start the collection. Minutes later, they find the merchandise sunk in the sea, but of the 4 boxes launched, one has been damaged and Charlotte notices marks that appear to be from bites. Even so, Jareth tells everyone to hurry up and get the goods back, without noticing that an enormous great white shark is lurking nearby. Silas is the first to rise to the surface and hands some of the glass jars to Baden, then returns to continue the collection. Everything is going smoothly, but through the radar on the computer, Teller sees new signals, indicating that something is fast approaching the group. He hurries to show the computer to Lee, who, seeing the speed with which the signals are approaching, believes them to be sharks. Before they can warn the team, a great white shark finds Silas, bites his leg and starts pulling him. He tries to hold on to an iron structure that has fallen into the sea, but the predator is stronger and takes its prey into the deep darkness. On the surface, Baden sees his colleague's blood emerge into the water and several shark fins begin to circle in front of the ship. To scare off the predators, Baden pulls out a gun and starts shooting, but Teller stops him, as this will only attract the attention of the young woman on the other boat. As he feared, Gia hears the shots and once again tries to contact her colleague Lydia. Afterwards, she approaches the other ship with her speedboat and asks if anything is wrong. Teller tries to disguise it and says that his friends are snorkeling, but sharks have suddenly appeared and they haven't come back yet. Without suspecting the group's intentions, Gia decides to help and releases an electromagnetic device into the sea, which serves as a shark repellent. The idea is to activate it to scare off the predators long enough for the divers to return safely to the ship. Teller agrees to the plan and the device is launched, just as Jareth and Charlotte see the sharks approaching. In a precise attack, Jareth hits one of them with the knife and eliminates it, but there are still several of them surrounding the site. Luckily, the device arrives in time and the sharks are repelled, giving Charlotte and Jareth the chance to swim back to the ship. Once there, Jareth comes across Gia, and to keep up appearances, he hides what happened from Silas and thanks her for her help. The young woman then introduces herself, claiming to be an accountant who used to sail with her late husband and therefore has knowledge of the sea and sharks. Jareth is surprised by this and says he has come to collect some goods at the request of his boss, who got lost at sea during the delivery. He then asks Gia to borrow the repellent device so that he can finish the job without risking the lives of his team. Gia agrees, but says that the device is running low and she thinks it best to operate it to ensure everyone's safety. Seeing that he won't be able to convince her to leave the repellent and go, Jareth loses patience and pulls a gun on the girl. What's more, he orders Baden to take Gia and her speedboat away in order to bait the sharks and make the way safe. With no other choice, Gia is forced to obey, and as soon as Baden starts the boat, she begins throwing buckets of bait into the sea, attracting the sharks towards her. Back on the ship, Charlotte scolds Jareth for his attitude, because if Gia is eliminated, it will only draw the attention of the authorities. However, the guy doesn't care and is only concerned with getting the goods back as soon as possible. Far away, Gia continues to attract the sharks when her cell phone rings, but Baden quickly snatches it out of her hand. On the other end of the line, he hears a message from the DEA, indicating that Gia is actually an agent for combating illegal substances. Upon discovering this, Baden tries to attack her, but is surprised by Gia, who easily disarms him and grabs him from behind. With all her strength, the agent begins to squeeze him until he finally loses consciousness. Gia then collects her equipment, secures Baden with a pair of handcuffs and calls the agency. Agent Lydia finally answers the call and Gia informs her that she has been approached by a group belonging to the Reverends Corporation and that they are collecting illegal merchandise that has fallen into the sea. The agent then requests support to capture them and expose the criminal organization. In addition, Gia has special reasons for this capture, as Dalton was also a DEA agent who infiltrated the Reverends organization, but was discovered and eliminated by the crime boss. However, Lydia knows that this type of operation cannot be carried out without authorization and orders the agent to return to base, under penalty of suspension. However, Gia doesn't intend to give up now, and when Baden wakes up, she decides to propose a deal. She reveals the whole truth about the investigation, and says that if he cooperates, he could get a reduced sentence. Baden refuses, but suddenly the great white sharks begin to stir and crash into the ship, damaging its hull. If things continue like this, the boat won't last long and the two of them will be wiped out by the predators. Faced with this situation, Baden agrees to help, and as soon as Gia releases his handcuffs, they both pull out their guns and fire at the shoal of sharks. Far away, Lee observes what is happening on the boat through the gun's viewfinder and relays the information to Jareth. However, he says there's no time to lose, and alongside Charlotte, they both jump into the water to collect the rest of the goods. Meanwhile, things continue to get worse for Gia and Baden, as the shark attack breaks the case of the speedboat, which begins to sink. With no time to lose, Gia decides to take the repellent device, and with the remaining cargo, try her luck swimming in the sea. Baden thinks it's crazy, but Gia says it's their only chance and tells him to accompany her to try and save themselves. The guy then pulls out his gun and points it in the agent's direction, but instead of shooting her, he hits a shark that was about to devour her. To make matters worse, Baden's gun runs out of ammunition and he has no choice but to follow Gia's plan. With that, the agent activates the device and jumps into the water, with the two of them swimming as fast as they can, while the sharks stay away thanks to the repellent. Unfortunately for Baden, he can't keep up with Gia and the two begin to drift apart. As a result, one of the white sharks seizes the chance and pulls the guy to the bottom of the sea, leaving a trail of blood around the water. Unable to help him, All that remains is for Gia to swim away from the sharks, just as Jareth and Charlotte manage to reach the boxes. Teller follows everything on radar and soon notices a new signal, indicating that another shark is nearby. Lee tries to aim at the predator with her gun, but it's too deep in the sea to be hit. So the sniper decides to enter the water, and with a wetsuit and a harpoon gun, she sets off to save the team. When she gets there, she comes across a great white shark, which, spotting new prey, lunges towards her. However, Lee fires her harpoon and hits the predator straight on, giving Jareth and Charlotte the chance to escape. Minutes later, the pair make it back to the ship with the boxes and ask Teller to help them secure them to the stern of the ship. Two of them are tied up, but when it's time to pull the third, another shark appears and starts biting the box. Lee quickly returns to the ship and takes aim at the predator with her gun. She then helps Jareth pull up the third box, but another shark jumps over the rope and its weight pulls Lee into the water. To save his colleague, Jareth hurries to get a pistol from the control room, while Lee desperately tries to get back to the ship. As soon as he grabs the gun, Jareth rushes back to the stern of the ship, but it's too late and Lee is captured and eliminated by the hungry sharks. With this further loss, the rest of the team is in shock, and to make matters worse, the third crate has also been damaged and the goods have sunk into the sea again. Faced with this, Jareth decides to call the Reverend and explains the whole situation, about the shark attack and the loss of the goods in two of the crates. However, the tycoon has no intention of giving up his business and orders the goods to be recovered. To prove that he is serious, he removes Jareth from command, appoints Charlotte as the new leader and even orders her to shoot Teller for not identifying that the place was surrounded by sharks. Without hesitation, Charlotte obeys the command, shoots Teller in the shoulder and tells him to put a bandage on, as there is still work to be done. Finally, it remains to be seen how to recover the goods, now that the sharks have surrounded the place again. Things only get worse when the predators get agitated again and start banging against the ship's hull. The impact is so strong that Jareth overbalances and falls into the sea, making him an easy target for the sharks. Just then, Gia manages to swim back to the ship and hides on the side, when she sees Jareth about to be devoured by the predators. Unexpectedly, the agent jumps into the water and advances towards the shark, which diverts its course and leaves. Afterwards, the two return to the ship and Jareth asks her why she saved him after everything that happened. As Baden was the only one to discover her identity, Gia continues to keep everything a secret and says she did it because only by working together can they get out of the situation. Even so, Jareth is suspicious of her and asks how a simple accountant managed to scare off a shark like that. Again, Gia replies that thanks to her husband, she has learned that sharks are not usually intimidated by their prey and that this can help in times of danger. Even though he is suspicious, Jareth thanks her for her help, but says that his boss's merchandise still needs to be recovered from the bottom of the sea. So, as Gia is an expert on sharks, he orders her to collect the glass jars and bring them back to the ship, and in return he will let her go free. The young woman accepts the deal, and after putting on Charlotte's diving gear, she sets off to the bottom of the sea. Managing to go unnoticed by the sharks, Gia manages to collect the remaining pots and finds a pistol lying around. After putting everything in her backpack, she returns to the ship and starts delivering the glass jars. However, Jareth doesn't want to leave any witnesses and pulls out his pistol, aiming it at Gia, who was expecting this betrayal and in one swift movement disarms the man. She then pulls out the pistol she has hidden in her backpack and points it in Charlotte's direction. Finally revealing that she is a secret agent for the DEA, she announces the arrest of the entire group and tells them that she has been investigating the Reverend's organization for years. What's more, she says she's already called in reinforcements and soon everyone, including the Reverend, will be brought to justice. Minutes later, a helicopter begins to approach and Gia believes it's the DEA, but Teller notices that it's not a police helicopter. In fact, it belongs to the Reverend, who has come personally to collect his goods. Disappointed, Gia ends up getting distracted, giving Jareth and Charlotte the chance to take her weapons and surrender the agent. In the middle of the confusion, the Reverend orders Jareth to tie up the packages and get on the helicopter. The guy obeys and his boss asks what's going on, with Jareth telling him what happened and that they've captured an undercover DEA agent. Once again, the Reverend reprimands him for his failure and that he should have eliminated the agent when he had the chance. After all he's been through, Jareth gets angry and tries to confront his boss, but in response the Reverend pulls out a gun and shoots him, knocking him back into the sea. This time, Jareth has no escape and is soon surrounded by several sharks, which devour him in a matter of seconds. After this, the Reverend orders the pilot to leave with the cargo, leaving his team to fend for themselves, but then a shark jumps out of the water and latches onto one of the crates. Because of its weight, the helicopter becomes unbalanced and begins to fall rapidly towards the ship. Before the collision, Teller activates the lifeboat and throws it into the sea, but is also caught and eliminated by the sharks. Nevertheless, the lifeboat is still intact and Charlotte and Gia jump into it. Finally, the helicopter crashes into the ship, but before being caught in the explosion, the Reverend jumps into the sea and manages to get a foothold in one of the crates. In the middle of the confusion, Charlotte reaches the dinghy and sees Gia in the distance, with a shark coming towards her. Luckily, the agent grabs a gun, shoots the predator in the head to scare it away, and with her path secure, she swims towards the dinghy. To her surprise, Charlotte helps her up, and then reveals that she is also an undercover agent. She feared that Gia would end up revealing her identity, and so the whole operation would be ruined, but now they both need to save the Reverend and keep up the charade, in order to bring him to justice. Gia agrees to the plan and the two go to rescue the Reverend, taking him into the boat. Charlotte then pulls a gun on Gia to keep the Reverend's confidence, who, on seeing the girl, asks who she is and why she tried to sabotage his operation. She then tells him that she was a DEA agent and that she had a score to settle with the Reverend, because her husband Dalton was eliminated by him. The guy then recalls what happened, and to provoke Gia, he says he had a great time when he put an end to Danton, as soon as he found out he was an undercover agent. Furious, Gia loses control and lunges at the Reverend, knocking his arm into the sea. In doing so, one of the sharks removes the villain's arm, but Charlotte pulls it back and tells Gia to stop the bleeding, as they need the Reverend alive. As a result, she also gives up her identity to the crime boss and the two announce his arrest. However, the Reverend is undeterred, and in the distance he sees a ship approaching and believes it is his reinforcements arriving. Instead, two police officers appear, having answered Gia's call. Finally, everyone is taken to the port and the Reverend is handed over to the authorities, while Charlotte and Gia celebrate that the investigation has been concluded. Despite the difficulties, Charlotte thanks her for her help and says that during her time undercover, she met Dalton. Not only that, but he gave her a tape recorder containing a message for his wife in case their mission didn't end well. The two agents then say goodbye and Gia listens to the recording of her husband, who left her a farewell song. Moved, the agent treasures this last gift and a few days later, she goes to a deserted beach with Daisy, the couple's daughter. The two enjoy the moment together, with the agent happy and relieved to have done justice and avenged her husband. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps.